born in Spindale, North Carolina. My daddy was working in the textile mill, and I don't remember when we moved away from there, but he decided he was tired of the textile mill, and they moved to a farm. And my first memory there was about my brother. I was 3 years older than him, and Mama was out washing. They washed in tubs, with a rub board and all that, and they had one to wash in, one to rinse in. And when you get through washing, you use the water for something else, scrub the porch or something. But my mother would let Bud play around out there where she's washing, in the dirt and what have you. So she'd wash him off in the wash water when she got through. And I asked her, I said, Mama, are you going to bathe Bud in this water? She said, yes. So I proceeded to pick him up and put him in the tub of water. She had a fit because I was about to drown him, I reckon. But after that, we moved a lot, but I don't remember now just when we moved to the next place. But at that place, I didn't go to school, but both my sisters went to school, and they got to take their younger ones one day, so they could see what school was like before they were going to start. And Lois and Doris took me, and we had strict orders not to get on the sliding board, at school, because they were hiding. But they wanted me just to try it one time. And I had this store-bought coat. That's the only store-bought coat I'd ever had in my life, So I wore my store-bought coat, and they talked me into getting up there and sliding down them. So I caught my coat, the pocket of my coat, and tore. So we were all afraid to go home. Anyway, I think Mama fixed it for me. But that's about some of my earliest memories. When we lived in this same place where I put Bud in the tub, Mama would let us set our little chair. We all had little rocking chairs, everyone, and that's what we put out for Santa Claus to fill up. And somehow our dolls would always disappear just before Christmas, and Santa Claus would bring them back with new dresses on. And so that was one of my memories about Christmas time, It was exciting just to sing if we'd got a whole tub full of stuff, I guess.
Okay.
My mother I guess we had to walk everywhere we went, and Daddy would always take us all to church. And a lot of times Mama couldn't go, but I guess if she felt like it, she'd go sometime, and she didn't, because we didn't have, and we walked a good distance. And so I can remember this particular time, and when we'd been to church and got back home, Mom was in the kitchen, fixing the lunch, and Daddy sat down and told her everything that preacher had just said. He went on like Charles did a while ago. He went on, about what, and I thought, how can he remember everything he said? And she would make us wash dishes when we were small. I can remember washing dishes before I started school. But she also had me watching my little brother one time, and mad dogs was something everybody feared, back then. And so I saw this strange dog coming up to where we was out there playing. Mama was in the house, and I took off and run in the house. And I told Mama there's a mad dog out there. She said, you just left your little brother out there for the dog to get? And I was worried about that. I thought, I never even thought about it hurting him. So that was my first realization I had a conscience, I guess. you know, ran this cornmeal, and it was run by water, and water, we lived right on the creek there, the mill was, and they put a dam up there to hold the water, and then the water run down in a trough thing to run the wheel around the corn. Well, we get up there on these rocks where below the dam, you know, where there wasn't any water much, and we looked for snakes all the time. Kill snakes. We just loved to get up there, and we'd get a stick, you know, and run them out from under the rocks, and we spent a lot of time catching snakes. And I thought, boy, I would never allow Warren to do that. I don't know how my mama stood it. She knew we sat there doing it. But if we had a hoe in our hands, there wasn't no way a snake could hurt us. We believed we could kill them any time we saw one with a hoe in our hand. And one other thing, when I was little, I might not need to tell this, my brother had a wagon, and he somehow, I guess the wagon got old, I don't know what, but anyway, it just had the two wheels, you know, and a little rope or whatever held up. And I'm out there riding on this two-wheel thing, you know, and holding the rope. My mama told me not to not do that because I was going to fall. Well, I did anyway. I went ahead and played with it a while, and pretty soon I sat down so hard I think I broke something. I never have hurt so bad in my life, but I wouldn't tell nobody. And we had to go out and wash these fertilized sacks, you know, when after Daddy used them out, you know, with the fertilizer, and we went and washed the sacks, and they used them for something else. Well, right then, when I'm hurting so bad, we had to go wash these sacks, and we go out there at the creek on them rocks, you know, and let the water run through the sacks. And I couldn't hardly bend over. I was hurting so bad. But I suffered through it. I wasn't about to tell nobody I got hurt. So I guess it healed itself. And then another dumb thing I did was, we played in the creek a lot, and I decided I'm going to dive off of this rock down in the creek, and I got my head stuck up in the sand. I managed to get out of that for it, but I don't know how I kept from breaking my neck. Now I see how dumb that was. And I think I've told you this story about when it was raining. When it rained, these creeks would get up, and we had to cross 2 or 3. We always had to walk to school for a long time. Then they finally got us a bus, and but we had to walk on these foot logs, you know, across the creeks. And Mama or Bud had gone up to the blacksmith. And this storm came up, you know, in the water and everything. Mama was just walking the floor. She's so worried about Bud out there, you know, somewhere. She didn't know where. And she sent Lois and I to see if we could find him. And we had a path, you know, we walked up through the woods, you know, up to it's about a mile, I believe it was. We had to walk to school the same distance up to this blacksmith shop. And so the rain had kind of stopped, but boy, when we got to this creek, the water was up to the foot log. So Lois and I just sat down on the log and tried to school across. Boy, one night I got a misstep there, and I go over on this side in the water. Lois grabbed my hand and pulled me out, or I'd been down that creek in a minute. And so we went on and found Bud just sitting up there waiting for the storm to be over. But I used to worry at school, you know, when it'd come a storm, because Mama worried so about, she was afraid of storms because when she was a baby, they was on horses going through the woods, and lightning struck a tree close to them and injured Aunt Dora's head. They had said she had a hole in her head. I don't know how much of a hole, but anyway, it affected her. And they were all scared of storms after that. And she wouldn't allow you to look out the window or stay by the fireplace or no place. You just couldn't do nothing but sit down and wait. Oh, well, my preteen wasn't too good. I had to change schools, and when I was in the 4th grade, I was, we started the Green Hill School. And I was, then of course we lost Mama when I was 12. And my life was never the same after that. I failed the 7th grade, that's where I was going. And we moved to Rutherford and went to city school then. And I failed the 7th grade. Seemed like I just couldn't concentrate on my studies or anything. So my preteen years wasn't too great. Can't think of anything good to say about those years.
How did your family survive, I guess, during the Depression years then?
Well, the same as Charles said, we raised what we ate, and we ate good. We never did have to go hungry or anything. And we didn't know we were poor. Everybody was in the same condition, and we didn't know that we were poor. We just thought that's the way people lived, I reckon, all the time. But one thing, after my mother died, the welfare, and well, we had a thing about the welfare. You're just the lowest if you took something from the welfare. I don't know how we got that impression, but anyway, they wanted us to give us some clothes at school. And Lois said she wasn't taking them, and I told her I wasn't taking them, and Doris took them. She said, you know, Mama always said if somebody gave you a dish rag, you should take it. So she goes on the bus, and we just mad at her for taking them clothes. We didn't think we needed no welfare clothes. But my mother always, made our clothes, and she, thank goodness for Sears catalog, she'd look in the catalog, and we'd find something we like in there, and she'd make our dresses like was in the catalog. So she was real talented like that. She's the one who taught me to crochet when I was just a little girl.
Where'd the fabric come from?
She'd order it from Sears. Sometimes, I know Daddy, this is after Mama died, he sold some cotton and, a bale of cotton or something, and he'd let us go pick us out a piece of material to make a dress, and I believe Lois made them then. You just do what you have to do, I reckon. But I always believed that they made a mistake when Mama died. They had me go home with Aunt Dora, spend a week with Aunt Dora. And I've been much better off at home with everybody else having to go through this, because I had to go through it when I come back home, just like. And so I reckon they thought they was helping me or making me go up to her house.
What did your mom die of?
She was having a baby, died in childbirth. We're trying to have a child, never was born. And back then, they didn't go to the hospital, doctors came, and the doctor had been there all day. He came early in the morning, and she died, I think, about 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, something. And she just couldn't have the baby, I guess. It just wore her out. I was 7. Well, I had left home when I was 16 years old, and started working with a family. They give you your room, and board, and I watched the children while they worked. And I think the most I ever made was $2.50 a week. But you could buy, like Charles said you could buy a dress or a pair of shoes or anything for $1.99, $1.98. So, you know, you could buy things you needed sometimes. And I had, but I kept these two children for this couple working. And then when the war started, I was 17. The war started. I remember very well. It was on a Sunday afternoon, and my neighbor had a girl about my age, and she had a date, and her folks wouldn't let her go anywhere with him. You know, away from home. She could, you know, you could come home, bring them home and court home. But they wanted to go someplace, and so her mother said she could go if I'd go with them. So I went with her, and we went to this, wherever they were going, somebody they knew, and they're the ones told us that they just heard that Hawaii had been attacked. So, and I didn't know beans from buttermilk I didn't know he was there. Didn't even know where he was, in fact. But I had to be 18 to get a job in the mill or anywhere. And so I did this until I got old enough to get a job, and then I got a job in a textile mill and weaving. And then during the war, we made this khaki cloth like the uniforms made out of. And then they froze us on our job. You couldn't leave the job and get another job during the war. And during the war, everything was rationed, or, you know, went to make material for the war. And the first thing they did was give you these sugar stamps, you know, to buy sugar with. You could only rationing is what they're doing. And then you had ration stamps for your shoes and everything like that. And hose got to be hard to get. You couldn't have to, if the store advertised hose, you had to stand in a long line sometime, and they'd run out before you get there anyway. And they were all silk hose then, there wasn't any nylon hose. So that was some of my teenage problems, I guess. I dated a guy that had a car, and then Lois was going with, I think she was dating Brad maybe at the time. We always went together because he didn't have a car, you know, you have to double up. So, but I didn't date him. I never found anybody I liked when I first, you know, maybe I'd go out with him a time or two. It didn't interest me anymore. But,
Okay, now tell.
I wasn't ever dreaming I'd ever end up with him.
Charles?
Yeah, because I'd been knowing him, you know, my mother and his sister was good friends, and we'd go up there and visit with them, and we'd call them aunt and uncle, his dad and mother. And I had to learn to quit calling them Aunt Susie and Uncle Jake after I married him, but I never dreamed, and I didn't even know he was in the Army or where he was until we was up there visiting his mother, and you know, they were just asking people to write to the GIs, write to them, you know, they need to get mail, So she gave us his address, and Lois started writing to him. And then when she got interested in Bud, when they got married, she quit writing to him, and I started writing to him. You know, we was friends, you know, first one thing led to another. I got a box in there full of letters, but I didn't keep those we courted in. I wish I'd have kept them. I think I left them in my cedar chest when we moved to El Paso, and I told Lois to just get rid of them, I think. But most of these I have now is ones where he's traveled. He's gone when I was with him. What was the next one? Well, we, like he said, he had been home on a furlough, and that's when he asked me to marry him. Then
Pause it for just a second. So,
when I was in about the third grade, I guess, we used to go up to where Charles lived and visit his family. My mother was a friend of his sisters, and they were about the same age, I guess. And in the first place, my grandfather was a preacher at their church. And my daddy went to go up there with him, and that's where he met my mother, because she was raised up where Charles's family lived. And so we would go back up there every chance we got, which wasn't real often, but we would go up there where they were. And I can remember Charles and Jim taking the black cat in the dark room, you know, and rubbing it and making the sparks fly. And my oldest sister got so mad at us because she had black hair, and we'd try to take her in a dark room and see if her hair would do that. She'd get so mad at us, we never could find out if she was going. But anyway, I'd been knowing him for a long, long time, and we'd play, like he said, in the creek all the time when we was up there, you know. But in that creek, they had a lot of rocks, you know, you could just walk around and not get wet, but we had to go down and play in the creek anyway. But Mom would always say, now don't get dirty, don't get your clothes wet. Well, we would every time, I guess. But now, where was I? When we got older, he had girlfriends, and one that followed him up until she died, I reckon. And but anyway, he is busy with his girlfriends and all. I never even thought about him as a boyfriend, but he's just, and we'd go up there and help parties and corn shuckings and what they call the cane strippings, and we'd just young people get together and we'd do all this work while we were just enjoying each other, you know. So we'd do that a lot, and my daddy got a little bit interested in his sister, and so we got to go up there a little more often, you know. But then I didn't know where hear from him for a long time, and didn't even know he was in the service until, you know, we started writing to him, trying to be patriotic.
And then what happened? You started writing him.
Well, we just wrote letters until he got his first furlough, and since he'd been in the service, and that's when he come home, and he asked me to marry him.
so what did you say?
Oh, I said I would, and he bought me my ring, and we went, and I told you all that before. We told everybody we was getting married, and when the war was over. So when he went back when his furlough was over, and they gave him another 5-day leave, I believe it was. And he come right straight back, and we decided we'd get married. And everybody said, well, I thought you was going to when the war's over. We didn't know when it's going to be over. But, you know, I thought I didn't know if he'd even ever get to come back again. But he was gone for 9 months when he had to go back. And he was coming home, like he said, the day the war ended. And the war ended in 45. War, years, you didn't have any money to buy anything. And after the war started, people began to get jobs and you had money, but you couldn't buy nothing because there wasn't nothing to buy. Everything's going to the war. Cars, well, how long was it before you could buy a car? Couldn't buy tires if you had a car. And so many things you couldn't get because that was for war material. So even if you had money, you couldn't buy nothing on it. Well, that's what I mean. You couldn't, for a long time after the war, you couldn't buy anything till they got the cars rebuilt, you know, and went back into but then after the war, things began to pick up, you know, and we had more conveniences and things like that. And I can remember when, I should have said this back in the beginning, that we never had electricity or anything like that, or water. We had to roll, you know, draw our water up out of a well or go to the spring and carry it. And and do our washing and everything, you know. So it's, and TVs and radios and stuff wasn't even a thought when we was growing up as kids. And I can remember the first radio I ever heard.
Tell us about it.
It was, one of our neighbors had bought a radio and they brought it over to our house and wanted us to hear Amos and Andy. They set it up on the mantle, and I never heard such a racket. It's just static and all kind of stuff. And they'd laugh. I couldn't understand the thing they said on it. You know, it's just a bunch of, and, but I don't know how long it was before we ever had a radio or electricity in our house. And after we was married, living in El Paso, I think his parents got electricity in their house. But they was putting it in places, but we just didn't happen to be able to get it at that time. But after the war, things just picked up and more people had jobs and the economy got a lot better and everything. You know, a lot of new inventions and just been really, so many things that we never even dreamed of as we were growing up before the war. But after like I say, after the war, it just wasn't there to be had. That's what the problem was. What do you think? Oh, I was living in Gastonia in an apartment. Lois had left, and her and Bud were married, and I was living there by myself. Well, it was really an apartment in a house with a family. And Charles and I, when he came home, we stayed there, a day or two, and then we went up to his parents. And he thought he might just live up there, and he's going to get a job with, going to be a postman, rural postman, but he couldn't get the job, so he decided to, I forgot now what made us decide to go to Charlotte. Oh, he got that job, I guess, to working with refinance something or other. He decided he might go back to school, and I don't know, we was just trying to figure out everything. And we had, we bought a house, and Lois and Bud and all and us lived in that house. And it was really a wreck, and they rebuilt the kitchen, and it'd been a fire, I think, in it or something. Rebuilt the kitchen and everything, but even then we still washed like this and hung our clothes out on the line to dry. And but he decided he was going to go back in the Army. And every day he'd come and tell me he's going to go sign up for the Army. And he said it so many times till one day he come home. He said, well, I went and signed up for the Army, and I didn't even believe him because he'd said it so many times, you know. And I could not believe it. And Lois told me that, said, you'll just have to get used to living in a suitcase, I can tell you that much. But while I was trying to get ready to go to El Paso when he'd gone and finally found us a place to live. Now, that's another thing, after the war, you couldn't find anywhere to live. No, like that. Everything was old, and there was no, full. People just wasn't nowhere to live. And it took him a long time to find us an apartment where we could go. And I was trying to get ready, and I was going to town to do something, and Lois had kept warning for me. And the bus had a wreck, and I hit the seat in front of me and got a bloody nose. And when they, of course, took us to the hospital and all the checking and everything, and brought me back home. And Lois said, "What in the world happened to you?" But I was so glad I didn't have him with me. This truck ran into the bus and caused it to have to. But anyway, I think they paid me $75, and that helped me get to get my ticket, I guess, to go to Texas. But when we went on a train, Warren and I did, to Texas, and we went to New Orleans and had to change trains and then we went on from there. It took us about 2 days on the train to get there. Of course, Warren was still on the bottle and all that, and had to have, stuff to feed him and hold him all the time. He's just 7 months old. And I got so tired of holding him when I just tied him on one of the seats. They had them where they had. So I got a diaper and just tied around him and hold him like to rest my arms a little bit, And then one lady offered to hold him for me, and she held him a little while. And I went to the restroom or whatever. I did something while she was holding him. Come back, and he's just gagging, and she let him play with the paper, and he'd got a piece of it in his mouth, and he's roof of his mouth. Well, that wasn't a good idea. But we finally got there, and Charles met us when we got there. Took us to our upstairs apartment and sharing the bath with 20 people, wasn't it?
Yeah, but quite a number of people. I don't remember just how many.
And then one of my worst things that happened there, Warren was in one of these little stroller things, where they walk around on. And I had just went in there and washed the bathtub so I could go take a bath. And somehow Warren got out of the thing, and he just walked himself out there, and down the stairs he went. And the lady lived down under, was upstairs, and she's living in an apartment right under. Come out there and picked him up. I don't know how he had to come right by where I was in the bathroom, and I don't know how he did it without me knowing it. But boy, he is getting out of there, I reckon. But I love, I guess the stroller helped keep him from getting hurt worse, because it kind of protected him from the steps as he went down. But I'd always heard, don't let him go to sleep, if he'd got a head injury or something. I just tried to keep my best, keep him awake all the rest of the day. But what I really liked about it, when we was in North Carolina, we had to, wash diapers and all that and hang them out. And it's raining a lot and damp, and they never would dry, and you end up drying them in front of the fireplace and all kind of. When I went to El Paso and I hung out diapers and they dried in 30 minutes, I thought, this is a place for me. So I always liked it there for that reason, as much as anything. But these apartments we lived in were terrible. We had roaches and everything else, and I put one we bought a playpen and let him sleep in it, and I'd put his, I was always afraid them bugs were gonna get on him. And what did I do? Set him up on something, I said this, playpen up on
Playpen.
something to keep, I thought would keep the bugs off of him. But from there, we moved to, the prefab, didn't we, Charles?
Hey, now,
Well, as soon as we could find something else, we got out of that place. And, but that's where we started going to church. And, taking warn, and they used to tell me that I just had one little old tree up there by the side of the church, and they said I was gonna kill that tree because I'd get a little switches off of it, help warn behave, you know. He wasn't all that bad though, he was a good kid. But, anyway, we started going to church, and, I'm trying to think. Oh, that's when I first started teaching beginners. It was in that church. We had a little room that we could put a card table in, and we could just barely get around it. And that's how big it was. We thought the children had to sit at a table, but I don't know why. But I learned a lot of things about it, because we had some people from, you know, that wrote the literature and all, that came and give us a lot of advice. And, so. I always loved working with children.
What are some other interesting places that you've lived besides El Paso?
Alaska. And Charles used to talk about seeing the northern lights. It's so much brighter up there, you know. And I said, well, I want you to come and tell me, or call me when you see him if he's on guard or something. So one night he called me, and I looked. And of course, we're in these apartments where you can only see out the back and the front. And I'm looking, and I found out I was looking in the wrong direction, because I didn't know east from west up there. And it was strange to get adjusted, because the daylight would change about 3 minutes every day, you know. Like if it's getting dark, it'll get darker 3 minutes earlier, or it'll get light 3 minutes earlier. But it was really hard to, and like when he started school, we could see the school is about as far from here, I guess maybe over at that service station, maybe not that far. But anyway, they'd send the bus to pick him up, because they didn't want the children to get, you know, in the snow, not get lost. And but I could see the school easy from where we lived. Well, one of the things is we could go camping and it stayed daylight almost all night. And then I enjoyed the fishing up there. We got to fish, and of course we didn't get to go a lot of places we'd like to go, because we didn't even have a car up there. But we had this friend, and he had a car, and his mother was living up there with him. And so she wanted to go a lot of places, so we got to go too. So Charles was driver with his car, and he'd be gone. So, but we had a ride to church every Sunday, and the only time I ever fell in the ice was when I come out of church and my feet went out from under me.
What about the volcano in Alaska?
Oh yeah, we had I was working in the nursery for the officers club, where they leave their children in the nursery there. And I was working there. And of course, I took one with me, but these women come in, you know, and this stuff's all over their clothes, bringing their children in there, and they send this, it was ashes, you know, raining down on this, volcano had erupted over there, and not, you know, it was, and all the ashes go up and they come right down on, and the lights went out, lights came on in the middle of the day, it's so dark, all them ashes coming down. And so I thought, how can them people come in here expecting to, you know, how can they get out and bring their children out like that? I was already there when it started, and I thought, I didn't know how I was gonna get home. But, it was, pretty bad there for a while. It was something different. I never was used to it. I was still not friendly with them. And, so an atomic bomb was a big fear, you know, and so they sent Charles come home with me, one of these, what you call it?
Gas mask.
Gas masks to wear. I said, well, what about Warren? Well, you can put it on and do something for him, you know. I said, I'll just see me putting one of them things on and him not have one, you know. But I couldn't see that, but I don't guess they ever did have you know, anything like that happen. But they tried to keep us alert. And when we was in El Paso, you know, you're supposed to keep your car half full of gas at all times, and when the children were at school. And I told Warren, and we were supposed to go to Carlsbad Cavern if there was a atomic bomb dropped or something. And I told Warren, I said, you go wherever the teachers tell you to go, and then we'll know how to find you maybe. Or if we had to take off somewhere and leave, I thought, how crazy, I don't believe I could do that. Thank goodness I never did have to. But,
Now, I was fearful as a child because of that. Were you fearful?
well, yeah, what might happen if you know, if we did have an alert or something. You know, we didn't know where to, so if I told him to just stay wherever they told him to, so you know, they didn't know where he's supposed to be. So, but they had to get under their desk, didn't you, sometime when you had a test or something. So,
How about living in, I guess, you lived in North Carolina and Duncanville then? You know, when Dad was in Greenland, so.
And in North Carolina and Philadelphia?
yes, well, Warren and I moved back to North Carolina when Charles was in Greenland. He was up there a year. And, we lived in this little house, and they had a lot of storms there, electric storms, you know. And I don't know if it had something to do with the wiring or what, but Warren and I were in the kitchen, and it was storming, and all of a sudden he just yelled out, and he said he thought I'd hit him on the back of the legs with a switch, and I hadn't even thought about hitting him. So we decided it was electricity running on him, hit him on the back of the leg. Well, you know, I was pretty dumb, and I was from the South, and the one story I'll tell. Dad and I were trying to find or Charles and I were trying to find a telephone place so we could get a telephone. And they told us it was at, forgot the little name of the name of the place they said to go to. But anyway, we're trying to find it, and then those people up there couldn't give you directions in no place. I don't think they ever got out of sight of home. And, you would stop and ask people, where are you going? Everybody knows where we're going. Tell them we're trying to find a telephone office. Well, you got to go to this, what was that name of that place?
Germantown.
Germantown. You got to go to Germantown. Well, we knew that. But where's Germantown? And so this day, when we're trying to find it, we stopped and asked the policeman. Oh, and he said, well, where are you going? I said, you have to go to Germantown. Well, and then some guy came up, or we asked somebody else, and anyway, he said, just follow me. I said, well, praise the Lord. We got somebody that's gonna take us to, and when he didn't say, where are you going? And I'm just thinking he's the only person in that city that was gonna help us, And if he got to the next stoplight, and if he didn't get out of his car and come back there and ask us where we were going, I'm not sitting there. And we just laughed over that for the longest time. Somebody saw our license plate, still Texas on it. How's things in Texas? And Charles told him something. I said, well, what did you tell him that for? He said, well, I wasn't going to let him know I didn't know anything. I wasn't going to act like I didn't know. He didn't know what the weather was or nothing at that time. Moved to Snyder. Charles was at Fort Hood, and we couldn't find a place to live. So we found this place, and it was like an apartment. It had a little kitchen thing in the bedroom, and in a family home. And it was the best we could do for a while. But anyway, we took it till we could find something different. And Charles, one night he had guard duty, and we didn't have a phone or anything. He had no way to contact me and tell me they'd put him on guard, and he didn't come home, and and I thought, what in the world's happening? And this is the bad part, when we didn't have telephones, and especially like we have now, cell phones. But anyway, we lived there until we found a apartment. It was upstairs apartment, and but Warren was in the second grade then, and when Charles was in I guess Alaska somewhere, he had drawn a picture and sent to Warren of some birds or something he had seen, and so. But his second grade teacher was talking about Indians, and she wanted to know if anybody knew of an artist, if somebody could draw things. And Warren said his daddy could. So Charles got out and hunted books or, color books or anything, see if he could find something that looked like an Indian. I never will forget us hunting for that. I don't know if we ever did find anything, but I think he tried and did something, but it wasn't. But Warren thought his daddy was an artist, I reckon, because he could draw something. Like we got him in trouble, I think. But then when we lived upstairs, he got orders then to go back. I guess we went back to El Paso from there. And Warren, when we were packing up to leave, Warren and his friends kind of got in a scuffle out there, and he was having trouble, and so I guess he was just nervous about moving or something, because they wasn't getting along too good, and I was too busy to try to referee, and so I was telling a friend of ours that, and said, I guess he didn't want to leave no friends behind. Oh, this is a good one. When we was living there, I learned to drive. Charles was teaching me to drive. And Warren was in the car with us.
This was in
And-
Temple, Texas?
And yeah, well, I thought it was in Snyder, wasn't it? I don't know.
Temple, Texas.
Okay, anyhow, you were learning how to
And,
drive.
yeah, when I was learning to drive, and Warren had his football with him in the car, and he's bored, of course. And me and Charles are arguing about how I should do things, and so Warren said he had me kind of going around like in circles, go down here and turn and go back and come. Warren said, asked me if he couldn't get out and play with his football. I said, oh goodness, no, I might run over you. We had our ups and downs. One of the funniest things I ever did was Warren. It was 10 minutes coming from home from school when we lived in Philadelphia, and I was just so worried because if he wasn't home on time, you know, and he had to walk a good little ways home, and I didn't like that area he had to walk through either. And I was just beside myself because he hadn't got home in time, and what happened, he had been playing, and with somebody, but I didn't know that, see. And so when he come home, I said, you're gonna sit in the chair 1 hour for every minute you was late. And I thought, after I got the thing, I said, 10 hours. So I had to back off of my threat. And Warren was trying to learn the multiplication table. And, you know, I made him a chart and put it up on the wall. And he'd go in there to do his homework sometimes. To see what the answers was, I think, or something. But I found out he was not, it wasn't helping him any.
What are some of your hobbies?
I don't know that I ever really had a hobby. I've done a lot of things and like to do a lot of things. Crochet and sew. And
What are some of the interesting things you've crocheted over the years?
oh, well, I've made tablecloths and Afghans. And you know, when all these crocheted collars were in style, I bet I got 12 laying in there now that I made. And by the way, I thought I saw a lady in church the other Sunday with one on. Oh, maybe they'll come back in style. Well, when they was having all of the Watergate hearings on the, I was listening at all of that stuff, and I was crocheting. I was trying to make a tablecloth. And crocheting, listening, crocheting, and getting a big way listening and getting my own opinion of these things. And looked down and I'd made a big mistake in my crocheting and have to unravel a whole bunch of it. And so it took me a lot longer to make that tablecloth than it should have taken. Quilting, I'm making a quilt when they did the O.J. Simpson trial, and I listened to that while I was quilting. I think it's different with the whole quilt while I was watching. Well, not any secrets in a happy long life, but if I was, I think one of my reasons is being able to adjust to the different situations. We've moved so many times, but the biggest thing I think that's helped me in that area is we just always found a church, and you meet new people, and you make friends everywhere you go and through the church. And so it wasn't hard to make adjustments like that when you make friends. have something in common. We went to one church up in the kind of church we usually go to, but we went anyway. And the preacher came and asked us where we were from. We told him originally we were from North Carolina. And he said, well, he told about a pastor that had this, that one of his members had, or he gave us letter that had all these names on it, a list, and said out beside it had NC. He said, I didn't know you had so many people here from North Carolina. He said, that does not mean they're from North Carolina, it means no count. So I don't know whether that was an insult or a compliment.
So what's the best thing about being a grandmother?
Oh, there's more than one best thing about being a grandma. Especially if you have grandchildren like I do. They've been very interesting. And I love them very much.